Hey everyone, welcome back to Anime Dreams. If you're into alternate timelines, unexpected power shifts, and deep character arcs, you're in the right place. Today we're jumping into part 3 of What If Pain Made Naruko Powerful? This is where the story takes a darker turn. Pain didn't break her, it awakened something the world wasn't ready for. Strength, resolve, and a path that challenges everything we thought we knew. Disclaimer, the content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Starting now. Let's get into it. Naruko had been moving swiftly for several hours, giving her ample time to formulate a basic strategy for entering the village. While a covert approach might have been safer, she believed that blending in as a civilian would grant her more freedom once inside. Of course, this tactic came with some risk. She might be noticed by the guards at the entrance, but she was relying on their typical routine and expecting them to be standard Chunin level ninja, perhaps a little too relaxed with their duties. Slowing her pace as a road appeared through the trees, Naruko leapt down from a branch, landing softly at the forest's edge, still hidden from view. Simply walking into the village without a backstory or documentation wouldn't be wise, so she needed to obtain the necessary credentials. She carefully placed her scrolls inside a hollow near the road, memorizing the spot before settling in to wait. After a short while, a man approached, pulling a small cart behind him. Once he had passed, Naruko quietly moved behind him and gently tapped him on the back of the neck in a practiced motion to ensure he rested safely for a while. By the time he awoke, she would be long gone. Searching his pockets with respectful precision, Naruko found what she needed, a passport and an identification card. Standing up, she took a moment to study his clothing before transforming her appearance using a simple transformation technique. After helping him rest comfortably against a nearby tree, she returned to the cart and began walking toward the village gate, which she estimated to be roughly a mile away. While walking, Naruko carefully concealed her chakra. Though her technique wasn't perfect against advanced sensory types, it was usually sufficient to deceive ordinary ninja. As she crested a hill, the gates of the Hidden Leaf village came into view, massive wooden doors standing open, with 2 guards nearby in the gatehouse. As she examined the outer walls of Konoha, something caught her attention. A section of the wall was noticeably lighter in color than the surrounding areas. It must have been recently reconstructed, she thought. But what could have caused the damage? The village looks intact otherwise. I guess I'll find out soon. Approaching the gate, Naruko had to suppress a small sigh at the sight before her. One of the guards appeared to be taking a nap, and the other was absorbed in a book, chuckling quietly. This is what they call elite security? They haven't even noticed me yet. She briefly considered walking past unnoticed but decided against it. She stepped up to the gatehouse and gently knocked on the wall to get the guard's attention. The guard looked up lazily and tucked his book away. "Passport and ID, please," he said in a drowsy tone. Suppressing the urge to roll her eyes again, Naruko handed over the borrowed papers. The guard examined them longer than she anticipated, making her momentarily uneasy, but then he shrugged and said, "All right, you're good to go," before returning to his book. Relieved, Naruko picked up the cart once more and walked through the gates. As soon as she could, she left the cart in a quiet alley and continued her journey under the cover of her civilian persona. The village seemed bustling with life and activity, with many buildings under construction. Areas near the walls, in particular, showed signs of significant rebuilding. Curious, she entered a small food stand, hoping the vendor might provide some context. "How can I help you today?" the vendor asked with a cheerful smile. "I was just wondering, there's a lot of construction happening all over the village. Did something major happen?" Naruko asked politely. The woman's expression shifted to one of mild surprise. "You must have been away for a while. The village was attacked during the Chunin exams by forces from Otogakure and Sunagakure. There was a lot of destruction, and we're still working on repairs. Even our previous Hokage passed away during the incident," she added quietly, her tone somber. Naruko raised a brow at the mention of the villages. "Sunagakure? I thought they were allies with Konoha. And Otogakure, what's that?" The vendor sighed. "They were allies, but they were manipulated into helping a newer village, Otogakure, which was founded by Orochimaru. After the invasion, they made peace again, but the damage was already done. So much has changed. Even the old Hokage is gone." Though Naruko felt a tinge of sadness, she knew that her journey had to continue. Before leaving, she bought an apple from the stand and resumed her walk through the village, carefully listening for anything that might help her understand more. Near a dengo stand, she overheard a conversation between 2 shinobi. Did you hear? The leader of the Kiri rebels came here personally to ask for support from the Hokage, but she was turned away, one kunoichi said. That's a tough call. I feel bad for them. They're being judged for something they were born with. But I guess Konoha has to be cautious. I don't envy Hokage-sama, her friend responded. Rebels in Kiri? A conflict involving those born with special abilities? Naruko made a mental note of it. The name mentioned, Kakashi, caught her attention as well. Could it really be Hatake Kakashi? I remember reading about him in the bingo books. If he's the new Hokage, things really have changed. He's no lightweight, even if he wasn't always top-ranked. She continued exploring, her curiosity eventually leading her toward the Uchiha district. When she arrived, the silence was immediate and unsettling. The compound seemed untouched, but lifeless. No children played in the streets, and no patrols stood watch. Could it be true? The entire Uchiha clan gone? She was stunned. When she was younger, there had been so many Uchihas living in the village. Their disappearance was beyond suspicious. As she walked away from the compound, her thoughts returned to her own past. For most of her life, she believed herself to be just another orphan with no known heritage. But recently, she discovered that her roots ran deeper than anyone had ever told her. Her true lineage remained hidden, and if she was going to uncover it, the village hospital might hold the answers. Naruko arrived at the hospital and surveyed the building, looking for a discreet entry point. She spotted an open window on the second floor and, after making sure no one was watching, she quickly climbed up and peeked inside. The patient in the room was asleep, and the space was otherwise empty. She slipped in silently and transformed her appearance into that of a doctor with a fabricated identity, just in case she was approached. Stepping out into the hallway, she moved purposefully and followed the signs toward the administrative wing. There, she found a room labeled Patient Records. Entering quietly, she began searching the files under you. As she suspected, her records, and any related to the Uzumaki name, were missing. Just as I thought. My history is being kept somewhere else, she reflected, closing the drawer softly and preparing for her next move. She walked along the edges of the dimly lit room, carefully scanning for any hidden section where additional documents might be stored. Her exploration halted when she spotted a towering steel door, standing nearly 6.5 feet tall. This could be a challenge, she thought. So much for a smooth entry. Naruko pulled a small scroll from her pouch and unsealed a pre-prepared sound-dampening tag. She placed it discreetly by the door and activated it. This would ensure her actions remained undetected. Of course, someone would eventually notice what she was about to do, but by then it would be too late to trace it back to her. From a secondary seal embedded in her forearm, Naruko unsealed her katana. With a focused breath, she channeled wind chakra into the blade. The chakra-enhanced edge allowed her to cut through the thick steel door slowly and deliberately, carving out a square large enough to pass through. When she was done, she delivered a firm kick to the center of the square, dislodging the cut section with a loud thud. She sighed in relief that the privacy seal held. Naruko crawled through the opening and entered the adjacent chamber. It was a modest room, housing only 2 long rows of filing cabinets. She made her way to the cabinet labeled U and began flipping through the files. Her hand trembled slightly as she found and pulled the folder marked Uzumaki Naruko. She opened it carefully and skimmed the documents until her eyes landed on the section detailing her birth. A wave of emotion overwhelmed her, and tears formed at the corners of her eyes when she read the name of her mother, Kushina. With a deep breath, Naruko located the profile for her mother and opened it. The file contained a photograph that made Naruko's heart swell with warmth. Kushina's kind features, vibrant red hair, and gentle eyes radiated warmth and strength. Alongside medical records was an overview of her skills. Naruko was astonished. The notes implied Kushina could have been among the most capable kunoichi in the village, rivaled only by the most legendary of shinobi. Ka-san must have been amazing, she whispered with a smile. Feeling encouraged, Naruko returned to her own file. Beside her mother's name was listed her father's, the 4th Hokage. Her expression shifted from joy to disbelief. Really? She thought, unconvinced. But as she considered it more, the resemblance became undeniable: blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a face shaped as if drawn from both parents. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. The person she had resented for much of her life, the village leader who had left her isolated, was her father. Her hands trembled, not with fury, but from a complex mix of feelings. Still, she calmed herself. She couldn't afford to be overwhelmed, not now. One troubling question lingered in her mind. Why would he place such a responsibility on his own daughter? She knew the act must have had a meaningful purpose, but that didn't stop the questions from swirling. Unfortunately, there was no one left she could ask, not without exposing her identity. With a shake of her head, Naruko tucked the files back in place and sealed the cabinet. The damage to the steel door would be noticed, but no one would immediately know who was behind it. As she exited the room and returned to the main archives, she noticed someone entering, a nurse, reading a clipboard. Not now. Naruko thought anxiously. The nurse looked up, her eyes widening as they fell upon the steel door. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, Naruko acted with a burst of speed and gently used a chakra pressure point technique to put her to sleep. Catching her before she fell, Naruko carried the unconscious woman to a discreet corner of the classified section. She regretted having to involve someone uninvolved, but this mission required subtlety and calm. Naruko slipped out of the building quickly, keeping her pace brisk but casual. She exited the hospital without issue, though the distant murmurs from inside hinted that her intrusion had not gone unnoticed. As she emerged into the open, she used a transformation technique to take the appearance of an Anbu operative, blending into the shadows of the night. She moved across rooftops through the less populated district, the area lined with clan compounds. But her momentum halted when a calm but firm voice addressed her. "I suggest you surrender. I'd prefer not to force you," the speaker said, his tone controlled but alert. Naruko turned swiftly to find a boy standing in her path. He was a bit older than her, with long black hair, a Konoha headband holding it back, and pale lavender eyes with prominent veins, a Hyuga. I wasn't prepared for this, she thought. The Hyuga could easily see through illusions like her transformation. Naruko raised her voice lightheartedly. "Come on, how about you let me go and pretend this never happened?" He didn't respond to her joke. Naruko knew a confrontation was inevitable. She stepped down to the quiet street, her katana back in hand, her only true edge in a match like this. Against a Hyuga, close quarters combat was too risky. She'd have to rely on her blade and mobility. Her opponent took a defensive stance. The battle began as he moved with remarkable speed, striking with precision. Naruko dodged his opening attacks and responded with a swift counter, forcing him to retreat. Seizing the momentum, Naruko charged forward, wind chakra once again enveloping her blade. Recognizing the danger, the Hyuga rotated rapidly, shouting Kaiden. A sphere of chakra exploded around him, deflecting her blade and sending Naruko sliding backward. She recovered smoothly, evaluating the chakra-heavy technique. It was powerful, but likely drained a great deal of energy. Naruko decided to wait for the right opportunity to exploit its weakness. She circled cautiously, analyzing his breathing and posture. With a burst of speed, she moved to his left and struck. He narrowly evaded and redirected her next swing. Naruko was impressed but remained focused. She feinted one direction before striking again, forcing him off balance. With a well-placed kick to the chin, she sent him tumbling into a wall. He got back up, though clearly shaken. As Naruko observed him, her attention shifted to his forehead, where his headband had slipped off. She noticed a unique seal etched just below his hairline, something she had never seen before. "What's that mark on your forehead?" she asked, her voice calm and curious. The Hyuga boy's expression darkened. "It's a clan symbol. Placed on branch members like me to enforce control. A relic of tradition, one that ensures obedience," he said, bitterness laced in every word. Naruko's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "And your clan just accepted this?" "They believed it was to protect our abilities. But it became a tool of control," he said, frowning. Naruko considered this. "You must resent the main family. Perhaps even the village?" His eyes sharpened. "What are you suggesting?" "Just answer," she insisted. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I resent it all. But I'm bound by that seal. And no, I hold no special affection for this village." Naruko smiled subtly. "Too bad you don't know anyone who understands Fuinjutsu enough to help." "Oh wait, you do. What are you offering?" he asked cautiously. "I can help remove that seal. But I'll need your cooperation. Until I return, gather information on the village's patrols, shinobi strength, and security details. When I come back, I'll have a solution. You can decide then whether to stay. Or leave." He hesitated. "And if you're lying?" "I'm not. But you'll just have to trust me until then." "Fine. But if you betray me, I won't forget." "You'll know when I return," she said, quickly copying the seal's details onto a scroll. As she turned to leave, he called out, "Wait. What's your name?" Naruko glanced over her shoulder with a soft grin. "Uzumaki Naruko." The boy nodded. Hyuga Neji. Until next time, Hyuga Neji, Naruko said as she vanished into the night. Neji stood in the silence, conflicted but intrigued. For the first time in a long while, a spark of hope flickered inside him. Naruko gave herself a small nod of satisfaction for what she had managed to accomplish. Everything she came for had gone almost exactly as planned. Even better, she had gained a new ally, Neji. Once she figured out how to safely remove the restrictive seal, she'd consider asking him to accompany her. It would be nice to have someone to talk to on the road. Her thoughts were interrupted as she spotted the village gate ahead. She quickly stepped into a side street to assess the situation more carefully. The 2 Chunin guards she had seen earlier were still stationed there. That wasn't a surprise. What concerned her was the presence of an Anbu squad speaking with them. They've probably found some evidence of my mission. They might be preparing to restrict entry and exit from the village, Naruko guessed. That couldn't happen, not now. Though she had some experience with stealth, it wasn't her strongest suit, and Anbu operatives were particularly difficult to avoid. With a quiet sigh, she stepped out from her hiding spot and calmly approached the gate. There was no real way to sneak past now, so she maintained her composure. On the inside, however, she was nervous. She had only ever sparred seriously with Akifumi, and while he was talented, he wasn't the same as an elite team of Anbu. The Anbu squad detected her presence immediately and turned toward her, followed by the Chunin guards. "Halt," said the leader of the Anbu unit, wearing a boar-themed mask. "The village is under lockdown. No one is allowed to leave or enter without permission from the Hokage." Naruko smiled politely and replied, "Ah, I see. I'm in a bit of a rush. Is there any possibility for a quick exception?" The Anbu captain narrowed his eyes beneath the mask. "Take her into custody," he instructed firmly, motioning for the other 3 Anbu to approach. Naruko raised her hands in what seemed like surrender as they moved in. But just as they reached her, she gave a knowing smile. Realizing what was happening, the captain quickly shouted, "Back away." But it was already in motion. Naruko whispered, "Kaze no Yaiba blade of wind," and released a gust of wind shaped like a sharp edge toward her would-be captors. The gust sent them staggering, caught off guard. One of them, wearing a sparrow-shaped mask, cried out and clutched their arm, while another dodged just in time to avoid the full brunt of the technique. The captain, however, stood firm, shielding the Chunin behind him and quickly regrouping with his team. Naruko knew she hadn't taken them out completely, and that meant her time was limited. She unsealed her katana from a small scroll, a trick she had practiced many times, and dashed forward with careful precision. The Anbu leader watched her, surprised at the skill she showed in advanced sealing techniques. Still, he remained composed. He skillfully blocked her blade with 2 kunai, meeting each of her attacks with calm precision. When Naruko tried a heavy downward strike, the captain locked her sword between his kunai, only to realize too late that her blade shimmered with chakra. The force of her strike damaged his weapons, forcing him to leap backward and toss them aside. As the shinobi regrouped in front of her, Naruko realized she was outnumbered and possibly outmatched if the fight dragged on. Just then, she noticed that the group had unknowingly opened a path between her and the gate. A quiet smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. She quickly reached into her pouch and pulled out 2 kunai, each wrapped in a tag, specially modified tools that Akifumi had taught her to create. Designed for precision and utility rather than destruction, the tags released a sudden flash and burst of smoke upon impact. She hurled them with expert aim. The moment they hit, Naruko activated them, creating a large cloud of smoke that obscured everyone's vision. She dropped several additional smoke pellets, enhancing the cover, and dashed through the opening, moving as swiftly as her training allowed. After sprinting for several minutes, she finally slowed down, taking a moment to glance behind her. There was no sign of pursuit. She exhaled in relief. That was too close. It's clear I have more training ahead of me. I need to improve if I want to overcome a team like that, she thought with determination. She also realized that her actions would likely be reported to Konoha's leadership. There was a possibility they might connect the dots, and if they did, they might send people after her. It doesn't matter. I'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, I need to focus on my next move. Naruko located a small hollow spot where she had hidden her supplies and retrieved a scroll, securing it across her back. Without wasting another second, she set off at a steady pace, moving away from Konoha. Far behind her, hidden in the shadows, a silent observer wearing a plain Anbu mask watched the path she had taken. Danzo-sama will need to hear about this, the figure thought, vanishing into the trees to deliver the report. Hokage's office. Are you certain? Asked a man with gray, gravity-defying hair. Despite the seriousness of the information he had just received, he maintained his signature calm demeanor. Yes, Hokage-sama. Both my team and I saw her. There was no transformation technique used. I can personally confirm that, the Anbu captain reported respectfully, still uncertain why his leader was so intent on the description of the intruder. Very well. You may go. The Anbu agent, donning a boar-patterned mask, bowed courteously before vanishing from sight using a high-speed movement technique. Hokage Kakashi's one visible eyebrow furrowed in thought. Someone had managed to enter the village undetected and breach a secured facility. He made a mental note to strengthen internal patrols and reassess the gate personnel's assignments. But what truly unsettled him was the familiar appearance mentioned in the report. Sensei? No. I was there. I know that's impossible. There's only one other person who could resemble him so closely. But she disappeared 7 years ago. His visible eye widened slightly. The child of his late mentor had vanished years ago, a wound in his heart that never fully healed. Even though he was instructed not to treat Naruko differently than any other child, he had always carried a sense of guilt. If only he had stepped in. If only he had done more. Perhaps she wouldn't have been taken away from the village. It was another regret that weighed heavily on his conscience. But now, someone who matched Naruko's description almost perfectly had reappeared, only to vanish once more after a serious offense. It didn't quite make sense, but Kakashi couldn't ignore the possibility. If there was even a small chance Naruko was still out there, he needed to know. Not just for himself, but for the memory of his teacher, Naruko's father figure. Unfortunately, the pursuit had yielded no results. Multiple trails had been discovered, spreading in every direction. Whoever this person was, they were resourceful and intelligent. With limited personnel, there was no way to follow every path. His thoughts were soon interrupted as his two senior advisors entered the office, accompanied by a heavily bandaged man. Kakashi sighed inwardly. As if his job wasn't already complicated, he now had to navigate the constant scrutiny and concern of the elders as well. Hino Kuni, Eastern Coast, 2 days later. Naruko moved with quiet confidence, pleased that her water-based clones had misled any potential trackers. By now, any search party would be thoroughly confused, and she was already well beyond the nation's borders. The ocean breeze greeted her as she approached a quaint port town nestled by the shoreline. The scent of the sea brought a sense of freedom. For the first time in years, Naruko felt lighter, less burdened. To blend in, she used a transformation technique to give herself dark brown hair and casual traveler's attire instead of the black clothing that hinted at her previous covert life. It was best not to draw attention unnecessarily. She strolled through the town slowly, appreciating the peaceful streets, the sound of the waves, and the ordinary moments she had long been denied. Travel, it seemed, suited her. After years of confinement and secrecy, simply walking freely was a luxury. Her expression dimmed for a moment. She wished she could share this experience with Akifumi. Until now, her personal mission had kept her focused, but solitude always brought reflection. Losing her grandfather figure had been a powerful reminder that time moves quickly, and opportunities can disappear in an instant. Naruko had made great strides over the years, but it wasn't enough. She wanted to grow, not only in skill but in wisdom. Despite her immense chakra reserves making certain techniques, like high-level medical ninjutsu, difficult for now, she was determined not to be boxed into one path. She wanted to be well-rounded, to avoid depending solely on others or facing loss she couldn't bear again. By the time she reached the docks, Naruko began asking around for transport to Mizuno Kuni. The reactions she received were a mix of amusement and disbelief. Finally, she approached one of the ship captains for a straightforward answer. "No one's sailing to Mizuno Kuni," the captain said with a shake of his head. "They've got enough trouble to deal with over there. Most folks here wouldn't risk it, no matter how desperate they are." Naruko nodded, taking in the information. The situation there must be unstable, but that only made her more curious, and more resolute. Naruko sighed softly, her spirits a bit low. It just didn't seem like fortune was on her side today. As she made her way down the line of ships docked at the harbor, the answer from each captain was the same: no availability. However, at the very end of the pier, she spotted a rather worn and aged vessel. The ship had clearly seen better days, but it was the only one left. Sitting on the dock nearby was someone she assumed to be the captain, a middle-aged man with messy gray hair and a weathered beard. He seemed preoccupied with a bottle in his hand. It wasn't ideal, but Naruko reminded herself that progress sometimes required compromise. She stepped forward and lightly tapped the man on the shoulder to get his attention. The captain turned around too quickly and nearly lost his balance in the process, stumbling slightly. Naruko pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose with a hint of exasperation, but stayed composed while the man regained his footing. "What do you want?" the captain asked with a grumble. "I need a ship to take me to Mizu no Kuni," Naruko replied evenly. The captain let out a chuckle that wasn't exactly friendly. "And how much are you willing to pay?" 130,000 yen, he finally said, smugness evident in his tone. He didn't expect a young traveler like her to have such an amount. "Fine," Naruko answered calmly, producing a large sum of currency. The man's eyes widened as he saw her begin to count it out. Without another word, he accepted the payment and motioned for her to follow him aboard. The ship was far from luxurious. After a short walk, Naruko found her way to the cramped quarters she'd be using for the journey. There was only a small bed and a bit of extra room, barely enough to turn around. Working on Neiji's seal during the trip was now out of the question, but perhaps this would be a good opportunity to rest and reflect. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, she closed her eyes and began to meditate, letting her thoughts gradually quiet. Within minutes, she felt a gentle pull from within her consciousness. She let herself be drawn into the sensation, and the world around her faded into the familiar quiet of her inner mindscape. Naruko opened her eyes within the spiritual domain that she had grown increasingly used to visiting. Despite not actually sleeping, it always felt slightly strange to awaken there. She stood and surveyed her surroundings. Following the familiar marks and grooves in the earth, she soon arrived at the large chamber that held the 9-tailed fox, Kurama. Interestingly, the mountains she remembered seeing the last time were now gone. Perhaps the space was shifting. With a light smile, she greeted the great creature. "Enjoying yourself, are you?" she said with a hint of humor. Kurama's deep voice echoed in response. "Oh, it's you. What brings you here?" "I have little interest in conversation, regardless of how uneventful this place may be." "I thought you were starting to warm up to me," Naruko replied with a mild grin. Then, her expression turned more serious. "I'd like to propose a deal." The fox narrowed his eyes but remained quiet, allowing her to continue. "I'm not asking for much, just a manageable portion of your chakra, without the overwhelming emotional pressure it usually brings." Kurama let out a short, unimpressed huff. "And why would I let a child borrow my power like it's a toy?" Naruko remained unfazed. "It would benefit us both. We both know you're not breaking out of that seal anytime soon. Granting me controlled access to your chakra gives you more influence over our shared future. And I can make things more interesting for you. If I adjust the seal just slightly, you'll be able to see through my senses. No more isolation. In return, I ask that you not act against my friends, and you'll have a chance to stretch your energy now and then, safely." Kurama considered her offer. "How much power are you asking for?" "Enough to mimic 3 of your tail's worth of chakra," she answered with measured confidence. The fox seemed to ponder for a moment before speaking again. "Very well. Do you have a formal agreement?" Naruko nodded, and in a flash of energy, a large scroll appeared before them. Kurama read over the terms and, with a slow nod, pressed a massive paw, now clean and free from any aggressive symbolism, against the document to seal the agreement. The scroll vanished. Naruko gave a small smile. "Pleasure working with you, Kurama." The fox offered no reply beyond a mild grunt, and Naruko took that as her cue to exit the mindscape. She returned to awareness slowly, stretching as she opened her eyes. Kurama had been unexpectedly cooperative this time, which surprised her. Maybe she truly was beginning to earn a measure of trust. She now had access to a portion of Kurama's immense power, and with that came new responsibility. She would use it only when necessary, and always with care. Trust was something to be nurtured, after all. Setting these thoughts aside, Naruko prepared to get some rest. The ship was still swaying gently, and its aged timbers creaked with every wave. It took a while for her to fall asleep in the unsteady quarters, but eventually, she drifted off into a peaceful, dreamless rest as the ship steadily approached the shores of Mizu no Kuni. Morning came swiftly, and Naruko awoke. She rubbed her eyes sleepily as she pulled herself from bed and climbed up to the ship's deck. A dark strip of land on the horizon caught her eye, bringing her relief. It seemed they would reach the shore within the hour. The voyage had been calmer than she anticipated. She returned to her modest cabin and began preparing. She dressed methodically, a long-sleeved black shirt beneath durable shinobi trousers, then layered her chestplate, greaves, and gauntlets. Finally, she unsealed a black, hooded cloak she had brought along. Where she was headed, the air could be brisk. With her hood drawn up, only her lower face, ankles, and feet were visible. She quietly chuckled to herself. Covering her identity wasn't just for warmth, The unknown often invoked caution in others, and that subtle intimidation could offer a strategic advantage. Once fully outfitted, Naruko ran through a brief inventory check. Her supply of ninja tools remained intact, but her food stores were limited. She had brought little from home and hadn't restocked since. With any luck, what she had would be enough. Returning to the ship's deck, she made her way to the bow. The captain was momentarily absent, which she appreciated. She leaned on the railing, watching as the distant island steadily grew closer. They were nearly there. Just then, the captain called out, prompting Naruko to turn toward him, mildly curious. "This is as close as I'll take you," the captain stated, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to get involved in whatever's happening over there." "That's fine," Naruko replied calmly, concealing her mild irritation. It wasn't a problem, she could make the rest of the way on foot. Without another word, she gracefully leapt over the ship's side, landing softly on the water. She broke into a steady run, her footsteps barely rippling the sea's surface. Behind her, the ship began its return toward Hai no Kuni. Naruko reached the shoreline and paused briefly to observe her surroundings. A narrow beach stretched in both directions, but a light mist obscured the distance. Ahead lay a sparse forest, with the rest of the island hidden behind fog and trees. She advanced cautiously, alert and measured in her movements. It would be embarrassing to run into trouble before accomplishing anything meaningful. She had no clear destination at the moment, only rumors of resistance fighters hidden somewhere on the island. They were unlikely to be near Kiri itself, which meant they were probably stationed further north. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. She pressed inland, hoping to encounter some form of civilization. A village could point her in the right direction. After running for nearly an hour, she stopped abruptly at the sound of a distant explosion. "Looks like luck's on my side today," she murmured, then moved carefully toward the sound, concealing her chakra signature and staying silent. The closer she came, the more she could hear, bursts of jutsu and the metallic clang of weapons. She was nearly struck by a water-style technique and swiftly dodged, the impact shaking a nearby tree. Approaching a clearing, she saw a blue-haired shinobi, likely a rebel, defending a group of fallen allies against 3 hunter nin. Realizing time was critical, Naruko prepared her own technique. From her hidden vantage, she formed a sequence of hand signs. Wind release, drilling air bullet. A compressed sphere of wind struck one of the hunter nin with great force, launching him into the tree line and causing another to stumble. The disruption gave the rebel the opening he needed. He swiftly incapacitated one enemy and wounded the remaining opponent with shuriken. Naruko emerged from the forest and landed beside the rebel, who gave her a quick glance before turning his focus back to the confrontation. The last hunter nin realized the tide had turned and attempted to flee, tossing a kunai with a small explosive tag behind him. When the smoke cleared, Naruko was gone, but only briefly. She reappeared ahead of the fleeing ninja and struck him cleanly with a punch that broke his mask. A second strike, a spinning kick, knocked him against a tree. He fell unconscious instantly. Naruko turned to the injured rebels. The blue-haired shinobi, understanding her unspoken message, rushed to help. He hoisted one of the fallen over his shoulder while Naruko created 2 water clones to carry the others. She herself picked up the unconscious hunter nin. "Lead the way," she said calmly. The man nodded and guided them into the forest. They moved in silence until he spoke. "Ow." Naruko glanced at him briefly before replying, "Naruko. I appreciate your help," Ao said, "but you'll need to stay with us for a while. There are questions we need to ask." "That's understandable," Naruko responded. Helping was simply the right thing to do. Ao nodded, and the silence resumed. They traveled swiftly until several figures in worn shinobi attire appeared before them. Their eyes lit up when they saw Ao. "Ao-sama." Mei-sama was beginning to worry. The speaker stopped mid-sentence, noticing Naruko. "Who is this?" "She's a friend," Ao replied firmly. "If not for her, I likely wouldn't have returned safely." Still wary, the others accepted his word. The group took charge of the injured and the captive while motioning for Ao and Naruko to follow. "Mei-sama wants to see you right away, Ao-sama," one of them said. "And your companion as well." "I expected as much," Ao replied. "She's already agreed to answer questions." Naruko gave a confirming nod and followed the group. She was surprised at the size of the encampment. It resembled a small village, with civilians and ninja alike bustling through makeshift markets, barracks, and supply posts. They passed a field hospital, and the somber expressions around it hinted at the hardships the rebels faced. Eventually, they arrived at a large tent, the command center. Guards stepped in front of Naruko until Ao spoke up, confirming she was with him. Inside, The tent buzzed with activity. Ao ignored it and led Naruko toward a more private area. From beyond a screen, voices could be heard discussing financial matters. After some time, a man in formal wear exited, clearly pleased with the outcome of the meeting. They entered the room, and Naruko was taken aback. The rebel leader, Mei, was young, likely not much older than herself, and clearly held in high regard. She was tall and poised, with auburn red hair tied in an elaborate style and dressed in a combination of dark blue battle wear and formal attire. Her striking presence and appearance hinted at strength and experience. Naruko also noticed her red hair, an uncommon trait outside of certain clans, sparking curiosity about a potential shared ancestry. Ao cleared his throat to get Mei's attention. She lowered her hands from her face, revealing calm yet tired green eyes. When she saw Ao, a relieved smile crossed her lips. "Ao, I'm glad you're back safely. What happened?" Ao's expression darkened. "We completed the mission, but were ambushed in our own territory." Mei frowned. "That's troubling. They're becoming more aggressive." Her eyes shifted to Naruko, whose hood still concealed most of her face. "And this is?" she asked, motioning toward her guest. Before Ao could answer, Naruko stepped forward and removed her hood. "Uzumaki Naruko, at your service, Mei-san," she said respectfully. Ao looked surprised by her informality, while Mei was caught off guard and coughed in surprise. Naruko offered a light smile. "Is something the matter, Mei-san?" Mei's eyes narrowed slightly as her expression changed. "What exactly are you doing here?" she asked, her tone no longer casual. Naruko blinked, a bit surprised. "I'm not sure I follow, could you clarify?" "Dear YouTube subscribers. That's all for now, but the journey doesn't end here. Stay tuned, because there's so much more to come. With love. Anime Dreams."